My father called me a disgrace in front of the courtroom, but the judge looked up and said, actually, her record's cleaner than her brother's. It happened in front of everyone, the lawyers, the clerks, strangers I'd never see again. I had shown up because I was subpoenaed, not to defend myself, but as a witness. I didn't expect gratitude, I didn't expect warmth. But I didn't expect him to say that either. He looked at me like I was something rotting. "This family's been through enough," he told the judge. "We don't need her drama. She's always been a disgrace." He said it like he was reading a fact, like it belonged in the case file. Not even a glance in my direction. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I had heard worse at the dinner table. Heard it when I left law school. Heard it when I refused to lie for Nathan. Heard it when I came home with my own truth and he called it rebellion. But hearing it in court, it still landed differently. Judge Ramirez paused, leaned forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrington," he said, "but based on these documents, your daughter's record is spotless, and your son's isn't." The silence after that sentence, heavy, beautiful, justice in 7 words. My father's face froze. Ruth stared down at her lap. Nathan clenched his jaw. And I just breathed. Slowly. Quietly. For once, I didn't have to defend myself. The truth did it for me. I never wanted it to come to this. Never wanted to stand in a courtroom across from my own blood. But they pushed me here. Years of being the scapegoat, the disappointment, the one who never fit in, all because I refused to play along. I used to ask myself what I did wrong, why I was the one always left out. But that day, I stopped asking. Because the judge didn't see a disgrace. He saw evidence, integrity, and a woman who showed up, even when it hurt. And the best part? I didn't say a word. Just stood there. While the truth pulled its own chair to the table. I wasn't the disgrace. I was the mirror. And they hated what they saw. Growing up in the Harrington house was like living in a museum. Everything looked perfect on the outside. The lawn trimmed, the photos staged, the smiles polished for neighbors. But underneath the glass, everything was cold. And if you didn't match the image, you didn't belong. My father, Douglas, built a reputation on respectability. A real estate broker with stiff suits and firm handshakes. He didn't hug. He didn't ask questions. He gave orders. Nathan was his pride, captain of the soccer team, loud, charming. The kind of son who could crash a car and still get ice cream after. I was the quiet one, the planner, the one who color-coded her notebooks and remembered birthdays. But to him, I was too sensitive, too serious, too opinionated. Those were the family words for inconvenient, for unshapable. For mine, Ruth, my mother, wasn't cruel. Just absent, emotionally checked out. She cooked, smiled, prayed before dinner, but she never interfered. Never once told Douglas to stop when he berated me for choosing journalism over pre-law. She just looked down and stirred her tea. By the time I was 16, I stopped trying to impress them. I got a part-time job, bought my own clothes, stopped asking for rides. Independence became my shield and my sentence. Because the more I took care of myself, the more they resented me for not needing them. Nathan got into trouble more than anyone knew. Parties, fights, reckless spending, but Douglas always cleaned it up. Boys will be boys. He'll grow out of it. When I asked why he never cleaned up after me, he said, "Because you should know better." I left home after college without a goodbye, moved into a tiny apartment, worked 2 jobs, and started building a life that didn't revolve around their approval. I thought distance would ease the sting. It didn't. It just made their silence louder. Still, I didn't hate them. I just kept hoping one day they'd see me, call me, ask me about my life without judgment. But the only time I heard from them was when they needed something, or when they wanted to remind me who the real success story was. Until the subpoena came. A fraud case involving Nathan, one that traced back to years of shady business. Deals. Suddenly, they remembered I existed. And not as a daughter. As a witness. That courtroom wasn't the first place I felt on trial. It was just the first place someone else finally saw it too. The red flags weren't loud. They were casual, normalized, almost polite. Like when Douglas gave Nathan a car for graduation and gave me a lecture about humility. Or when Ruth said, "You don't need much. You've always been the strongy one," right after skipping my birthday dinner. When I got accepted into a top university, Nathan rolled his eyes and said, "Don't get too full of yourself." My dad laughed and added, "Remember, book smarts don't make you wise." But when Nathan got a low-tier internship through family connections, they treated it like he landed at NASA. Even when he messed up, like when he borrowed money from our uncle and never paid it back, they covered for him. "He's under pressure," Ruth said. "He'll make it right." I asked once if I could borrow $500 for textbooks. My dad replied, "Don't come running when life gets hard." They never forgot to praise Nathan in public. At family events, church picnics, barbecues, he was the story they told. Our boy is in finance. He's a born leader. When people asked what I did, Marlene would tilt her head and say, "Oh, Brielle, she's finding her way." I was always the emotional one, the too serious one, the one who held grudges. But the truth is, I held receipts. I remembered every time I was sidelined, every time my name wasn't mentioned, every time they celebrated him for things I'd done better, in silence. When I published my first investigative piece, it made small waves in local media. Nathan texted me, "Congrats, I guess." Douglas said nothing. I sent them the link. Anyway. Ruth replied, "This must be hard for Nathan, seeing you get attention right now." One Christmas, I flew home hoping things might shift. I brought gifts. Thought maybe after years away they'd see me differently. But when I arrived, my name wasn't on the seating chart. They told me it was just a misprint. Nathan's dog had a seat. I didn't. The night before Nathan's trial, Ruth left me a voicemail. "I know you'll do the right thing in court. Blood is blood, Brielle." I almost laughed, because I had never been treated like family until they needed me to protect theirs. What they wanted wasn't justice. They wanted silence. They wanted me to lie on the stand to save the story of the perfect son. But this time, I wasn't going to rewrite myself out of the truth. Walking into that courtroom felt like entering enemy territory. Not because of the case, I wasn't the one on trial, but because I knew exactly how my family would treat me, with polished disdain, with the kind of coldness that doesn't show up on transcripts but bleeds in memory. Douglas didn't greet me. He just nodded, like I was a stranger. Ruth gave me a half smile, then whispered, "Be careful what you say. We're all counting on you." Nathan winked, actually winked, like this was all just another game he expected to win. When I took the stand, I told the truth. About the emails, the fake accounts, the wire transfers Nathan asked me to ignore, the time he offered to cut me in if I kept quiet. I said it calmly, clearly, with documentation. I thought that would be enough, but then Douglas stood up, asked the judge to let him clarify something. The judge allowed it, and Douglas turned to me, pointed, and said, "She's always resented her brother. She's using this to get back at him. She's a disgrace to this family." It hit like a slap, not because it was new, but because it was said with such certainty, like I was the disease, like honesty was betrayal. The courtroom went silent. Even the stenographer paused. My breath caught, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't give him that. Judge Ramirez looked at Douglas, then looked at the file. Flipped through page after page. "You do realize," he said slowly, "that your daughter's record is spotless, while your son has 2 prior citations for financial misconduct?" A murmur rippled through the room. Douglas froze. Ruth blinked. Fast. Nathan looked down, suddenly very interested in his shoes. And I just sat still. Not victorious. Not smug. Just real. For once, my name wasn't being twisted. It was being cleared. Not by family, but by facts. After the session, Ruth tried to approach me in the hallway. "He didn't mean it," she said. "Your father just lost control." I looked at her and said, "He meant every word." And I finally heard it. Nathan didn't look at me again. Neither did Douglas. I was no longer useful to them. Not as a cover, not as a scapegoat. And honestly, that was the first moment I felt free, because I didn't need them to see me anymore. The world had, and that was enough. After court, I drove until my gaslight came on. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to be somewhere that didn't smell like old carpet and betrayal. Somewhere no one looked at me like I was the problem for telling the truth. I parked, in front of a lake I used to visit in college. I sat there, keys still in the ignition, trying to understand what I felt. Relief? Rage? Loneliness? Maybe all of them, maybe none. I felt like my body had survived a storm, but my heart hadn't. I kept replaying the moment my father said disgrace. Not because I believed it, but because part of me still wanted him to say it wasn't true. To take it back. To look at me like a daughter instead of a headline he didn't like. But he didn't. He wouldn't. I finally understood that. He needed a villain to protect the illusion of Nathan's greatness. And I was easy to cast. I didn't beg. I didn't lie. I didn't perform. I was disposable in a story built on male pride. I cried that night, the kind of cry that doesn't make sound. Just tears and shaking and silence. I wasn't mourning a father. I was mourning the hope of one. The version I kept alive in my head. The one I thought might exist if I did enough. I took 2 days off work. Turned off my phone. Ignored the internet, the articles, the texts. My body was still, but my mind was on fire. I thought justice would feel like closure. But all it did was expose how deep the wound went. A friend from college, Camilla, came by unannounced. She brought soup and sat on my couch, scrolling her phone while I stared at the ceiling. At one point, she said, "You were always the strongest one in your family. That's why they resented you." I didn't answer, but I felt it in my spine. The silence from my parents continued. No apologies, no calls, no explanations, just void. A part of me still hoped for a text. But I also knew, deep down, that I wouldn't want what they had to say. Not anymore. Strength isn't always a roar. Sometimes, it's just staying upright when everything you believed in falls apart. That week, I didn't fight. I didn't build. I just breathed. And maybe that was enough because I wasn't broken. Just unhooked from the fantasy. And slowly, that was starting to feel like freedom. A week after the trial, I received an envelope at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of bank records. Nathan's, transfers, hidden accounts. One traced back to an offshore fund in the Cayman Islands. The amounts weren't small, and they weren't new. There was also a note, typed. "He's done this before. Ask Marcy." No signature. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I was tired of chasing proof. Tired of being the one who uncovered everything while the others just played shocked and clueless. But curiosity won. I dug into old contacts. Old documents. Marcy was Nathan's ex-girlfriend, the one who disappeared from family gatherings suddenly 3 years ago. I found her on LinkedIn, sent a message. 2 days later, she replied, "I've been waiting for someone to ask." We met at a coffee shop. She brought a folder, receipts, screenshots, emails. "He took out loans in my name," she said. "When I found out and threatened to press charges, Douglas paid me to disappear, said I'd ruin a good man's future." My stomach turned. Marcy looked at me and said, "They protect him like he's a prince, but he's poison." I nodded, because I already knew, but hearing it from someone else made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I wasn't the only one he used. I was just the only one who stayed. That night, I opened my old laptop, started compiling everything, documents, files, timelines, not for revenge, for record, for clarity. I wanted the full picture, not the edited version my family lived by. The truth. Unfiltered. Even if no one ever saw it but me. What I found made me sick. This wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern. Forged signatures, misleading investors, manipulating people close to him for personal gain. And through it all, Douglas either looked the other way or helped clean up the mess. I called Arthur, an old family acquaintance who worked in legal compliance, sent him the files. He called back 10 minutes later. "This isn't small, Brielle," he said. "If you want to press this further, you'll need protection. You're sitting on a bomb." I laughed quietly. "I've been sitting on a bomb since I was born," I told him. "This is just the first time I'm choosing where it lands." Because the truth wasn't just that I wasn't the disgrace. It was that I had been holding together the very name they accused me of tarnishing. I didn't go to the press. I didn't post anything online. I didn't even tell my friends what I was planning. I just sent everything, all the evidence, timelines, and Marcy's statement, to the DA's office. Anonymous, but complete. They opened an investigation within a week. Quiet, discreet, but the shift was instant. Nathan called me in a panic. "Did you do this?" he hissed. "They're asking questions, looking into my accounts." I didn't confirm or deny. I just said, "Funny. You always said you had..." "Nothing to hide." Douglas called next, voice calm but tight. "You're playing with fire, Brielle. This won't end well for any of us." I replied, "It's already ended, Dad. You just didn't notice." Then I hung up. That silence? It wasn't fear. It was peace. The investigation widened. Former business partners came forward. A civil suit was filed. His bank accounts were frozen. Nathan tried to pivot the narrative, said it was all a misunderstanding. But the receipts were louder than any charm he had left. Douglas tried to salvage the family name, released a statement distancing himself from unethical financial practices. But the public wasn't stupid. They saw through it. The press called it a legacy collapsing from the inside. For once, I wasn't mentioned. And that was the point. The judge from our original case, Ramirez, released the official transcript to the public record. That line, "Her record's cleaner than her brother's," started circulating on legal blogs. People remembered, quietly, clearly. Marcy finally pressed charges. I supported her anonymously, covering some of her legal fees. Not because she needed saving, but because no one had believed her before. And I knew what that felt like. I wasn't saving her. I was standing beside her. Ruth tried once more, a letter in the mail, handwritten. "You've hurt this family more than Nathan ever did." I folded it once, twice, dropped it in the trash. I didn't need her blessing. I had my own. Justice didn't come with a headline or applause. It came in the form of accountability, consequences, and silence from those who used to call me the EO's. Problem. They wanted a disgrace to blame, but all they had left was the truth, and that was louder than anything I could have shouted. I moved to a smaller apartment across town. No one knew the address. It didn't have the skyline view or the hardwood floors, but it had something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. No expectations, no surveillance, no one to impress. My mornings became mine again. Coffee with actual flavor. Silence that didn't feel like punishment. I started writing again, not for work, not for survival, but for me. Paragraphs that didn't ask for permission. Truths that didn't need validation. One day I got a message from a young reporter I once mentored. "I read what happened," she wrote. "You handled it with more integrity than most people twice your age." I stared at that message for a long time before replying. "Thank you. That means more than you know." I didn't attend Nathan's sentencing, didn't watch the interviews. I didn't need closure. I had it the moment I chose to tell the truth. Not for them, but for myself. The courtroom had been the first time the world saw me clearly. I didn't need to be seen again. I just needed to keep walking. Douglas and Ruth faded from my life like wallpaper in a house I no longer lived in. No more letters, no more lectures, just distance. Not as punishment, but as preservation. I wasn't angry anymore, just uninterested. I published an essay months later, anonymously, about family roles, about silence, about the weight of always being the responsible one. It went viral, not for scandal, but for recognition. Women messaged me from everywhere. You told my story, they said. I didn't reply to most, but I read them all, because for so long I thought I was alone in that silence. The daughter, no one clapped for. The sister expected to hold everything together. Turns out, we're everywhere. We're just quiet, until we aren't. My name wasn't in the headlines. My photo wasn't in the articles, but my voice, it echoed. And that was enough. Because legacy isn't built in bloodlines. It's built in truth, in choice, in refusing to play roles that erase us. I still carry scars, but not shame. I didn't win by destroying them. I won by surviving them. And by never becoming like them. Because in the end, when they called me a disgrace, they meant I didn't belong to their lie, and now finally I don't.